We can't speculate about someone's
Actually, we can.
chromosomes.
We can when they win gold medals, because you just said it's never happened. When a woman, or says she's a woman, wins a gold medal in a women's sport, and when one of the female competitors who competed against her in an earlier round said she had to quit after 40 seconds because she'd never been hit that hard, damn right we can ask some difficult questions.
In this clip of Piers Morgan Uncensored, we have probably one of the wokest panels I've seen in quite some time, in which in this clip they're specifically arguing whether or not biological males who identify as women should be allowed to compete in women's sports, where Tomi Lahren, as usual, comes out swinging. She's joined by a diverse group of panelists, including trans activists, a professor, and other commentators. So let's get into this debate and I'll give you my unfiltered take. Let's go.
Even if it tramples on
you
a few little oversensitive feelings. It is ridiculous. There was no sex test done.
Said she supports a main caliph's right to participate.
Why didn't she have a sex test to clear this up?
Again, I can't speculate about someone's gender.
But would you not support having sex tests? It's the easiest way to determine somebody's sex. You give them a test.
I think, like Neil deGrasse Tyson said, that we should have different levels of competition.
How? Explain to me how that would work.
There are different metrics, and this would depend sport by sport. Most sports now do allow trans women to compete. I also do want to correct something, too, that there have been several trans men who have won in male competitions at the global level.
Oh, really? Name one. This is the classic move. Throw out a claim without backing it up, hoping no one will notice. Let's talk about this supposed dominance of trans men in male sports. Rugby, swimming. If it's happening, why isn't it plastered all over ESPN? Because maybe it's not happening. Biological realities mean that trans men competing against biological males are at a disadvantage. And everyone knows it. And let's just, for the sake of argument, say we did have a few male trans women win in male sports. It is the extensive minority, almost completely negligible. So trying to use that as backing up your argument is almost the same as saying we should bomb an entire city simply because one person is sick.
What were the competitions?
This includes everything from rugby to swimming.
Rugby? You think there's a trans man who's beaten all the men at rugby?
I'm not saying that a trans man is the best rugby player in the world, but there are plenty of trans men who have competed at the global level.
Yeah, there are very, very few, and what they don't do is they don't win because they're physically inferior. Tomi Lahren, I mean, okay, let me bring in Tomi. We've got two other panelists. Tomi, look, to me, it's a simple question of biology, as we heard from the professor. And when I hear, with all due respect to Eli, and I absolutely respect your right to have your opinion, but I just think it's flying in the face of basic fact.
It is. And, you know, Piers, I wonder, is it going to take a female athlete being seriously injured or even killed for people to understand how serious this is? It has nothing to do with transphobia and bringing up trans men or biological women who are competing against men because they are trans men, whatever the terminology is for all of that. You don't see the outrage at that because, as you mentioned, Piers, they're not winning. They're not crushing the competition. And if they have, it's in very, very few cases that are negligible. What you're seeing also, you're not seeing the outrage about that because it's very few cases, I haven't heard of any, where trans men, biological women who are transitioning to men, want to be in men's locker rooms, that want to make men feel uncomfortable while they're changing, being in their changing space, watching them undress. So it's a completely different situation. And when you ignore not only biology, but when you ignore gender itself, why should biological women, and I don't even like saying that, Piers, I don't like even referring to myself as a biological woman. I'm a woman, okay? I was born that way. I don't like having to preface that with what I am biologically. I'm a woman. Why should me and other women like me have to put up with competing against men or having men in our locker rooms, men in our restroom, because it makes a very, very small segment of the population feel better about themselves? Why do their feelings trump the feelings of women? That's what I don't understand in this argument, in this debate.
To be honest, Tomi, I don't understand it either. I mean, this is honestly honestly the heart of the issue. Why is it always women who have to compromise? Men don't have to deal with this nonsense. You don't see women transitioning to men and suddenly demanding access to NFL locker rooms or dominating in heavyweight boxing. It's almost women who are told to just deal with it. Why? Because they think women will stay quiet and take the hit. But here is the truth. We're at a point where they're simply tired of being silenced. The idea that someone's feelings should outweigh women's rights is insane. And to be very honest, her entire argument is just a fact. At the end of the day, this is not the majority opinion. Most people do not feel this way. So trying to make all of these changes and apply it to everyone makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, this world functions on what the majority believe and what the majority want, and that better not change now.
No, I don't. And Brianna, as the professor said, he's had death threats, people wanting him dead, simply because, as a biologist, he spells out the bleeding obvious factual reality of this. And as he points out, he's not remotely transphobic, nor am I. I want trans people to have exactly the same rights to fairness, equality, and safety that I enjoy. I've always said that.
How is it equality if we don't have the same
Hold
access?
hold on, Eli.
Well, hang on.
I'll
I'll come back to you, Eli.
Let me
I'll
go.
answer that question, but let Brianna answer. But here's the point. It doesn't make you transphobic if you actually don't want to see women's rights eroded in the process.
Of course it doesn't, Piers. You know, this is the whole problem. The Eli and her trans fringe freak show friends are threatening anyone that disagrees with them. I, as a trans woman, have dealt with their death threats constantly since just standing up and trying to say, we've got to have some common sense conversations about this. There's nothing he said in that interview that's remotely transphobic.
No.
And the thing is, he is in the middle. And what is happening with this brain dead progressive fringe movement is they are taking Democrats that would be on our side, that want to have trans rights protected. They are turning it into the enemy, and they're destroying these organizations so they can't stand against the Republicans that want to take away everything here. They are annihilating our defenses. And Eli, I really want to know, this is my direct question for you. When does this brilliant progressive plan you have for trans rights, when does this curve kick in and we start winning elections again? Because my generation had this for years, and it was progress that you enjoyed when you had your stuff paid for. When do all your brilliant ideas kick in and we start winning elections again? Because you're destroying our entire movement. You're doing things like giving hormones to children. You put together a network for this. You lied about it in the aftermath. When did your ideas start working, Eli?
Eli?
We heard this exact same rhetoric during the civil
When
rights
do your
movement,
ideas
the
start
gay
working?
rights movement.
What is the point? When do they start working?
Progress takes time. You know this, and we've talked before. It does take time, and we can't cut into the rights of anyone. Trying to throw anyone under the bus means that we erode all rights. And we've seen this already with the Supreme Court knocking down certain transgender rights. Next comes abortion, then comes cisgender women's rights, then comes free speech. We've seen it over and over again. We've seen it with the civil rights movement. We've seen it with the gay rights movement of the 1960s to 80s. There's going to be this period of demonization.
That's your answer. Just keep waiting with these brain dead tactics. They're losing elections. Trump is back in office with your playbook, Eli. Your playbook. You put Trump back in office.
Kamala wouldn't even say the word transgender. I really don't think that's very progressive.
No, what she did do.
That ad is
hang on, Brianna. I mean, what Kamala Harris did do, she and President Biden both supported having trans women in women's sport. And that was part of the most successful political ad in recent memory. As I said to the professor, when you had an ad that ended up, Kamala's for they, them, Donald Trump's for you. That was deemed to be the most effective ad in modern political American history.
That's
right?
correct.
At some point, Eli, you've got to look at yourself and think, wow, our campaign isn't working. Telling people that it's okay for biological men to come into women's sport and be massively more successful as women than they ever were as men, which is what happens in almost every single case. That is not fair. It's not equal. It's not right. It's cheating.
Hey, Piers is making sense, I love it. And he's absolutely spitting facts. If your movement is alienating people left and right and losing elections, maybe it's time to rethink your strategy. But no, instead of self-reflection, they double down. It's like steering a sinking ship and deciding to drill more holes because this time it'll work. Here's a wild idea. Focus on the issues that unite people instead of pushing divisive fringe ideas that most of the population rejects. Maybe then you'll start winning again. But hey, if self-sabotage is the goal, they're doing an excellent job.
And if you don't think it is, and you try and pretend it isn't, eventually, as we saw, most Americans wake up and go, bullshit, I'm going to vote for Trump even if I don't like him, because he'll stop this madness. And I simply say to you, I want all trans people to have fairness, equality and safety. Why would you jeopardize all that at the altar of such obviously unfair, unequal, unsafe bullshit? Genuinely.
If you actually look at the polls, the most popular, the most important electoral issue for people, it wasn't trans people. That was about 1%.
I didn't say it was, but I did say
economy.
the advert I talked about was the most successful in modern times. The New York Times, a liberal progressive newspaper, concluded it may have moved the needle by 3 points. Right? That was the damage.
The New York Times is not,
that Kamala Harris's
liberal or
pro-trans bullshit
on
had
trans
caused.
issues.
She can't answer, Piers. She will not defend these brain-dead tactics. You know, Piers, I don't want to go compete against Tomi in sports. I want to go have lunch uptown with her and like talk about normal stuff.
Right.
That's why I transitioned to just have a normal life. Eli is out there pushing this narrative that science doesn't matter, that sex doesn't matter, that we can just roll into every space. She claims to be a feminist, but she doesn't want to make any common sense compromises with the women she says she speaks for.
Yeah, and we see, as we saw, right, and as we saw with J.K. Rowling, and we saw with the professor, and we see with everyone. I've had it. When you poke your head over this, Tomi, and you say this stuff, the trans lobby, let's just use the collective phrase. I'm not saying they're all like this by any means. I'm not even including you, Eli, but the abuse, the threats, the viciousness, the calls to be cancelled, the targeting of your employment, of your bosses, and so on. It's so insidious. And to me, it's so self-harming to the cause. I know people who are trans, who are very quiet, want to get on with their lives. They don't want all this nonsense. They don't want the trans lobby trying to pretend it's fine for trans women to be in women's sport, because they know everybody laughs at it and makes them a laughingstock. They just want to lead their lives like the rest of us. And I wish they could without being dragged into this crap.
Piers brings up a honestly very important point. Most trans people aren't out here demanding to redefine biology or push their way into spaces where they're not welcome. They just want to live their lives in peace like everyone else. But the activist fringe has hijacked the conversation, turning it into this loud, hostile, and polarizing issue. It's simply not fair. The irony is this fringe activism is doing more harm than it is good. It's creating a resentment, not understanding. This is honestly a classic case of just simply the smallest group of people having the loudest voices and making it seem like that's what the entirety of that side thinks.
Yeah, and Piers, look no further than the way that Caitlyn Jenner is treated by the left and by many in the LGBTQ rainbow mafia, as I call them. That is that far left fringe part of the LGBTQ movement that is seemingly louder than the rest of the movement, and that's really unfortunate. But I'll tell you, Piers, what I think a lot of this comes down to. I think that there are a lot of activists and a lot of activist organizations out there that make a lot of money on this issue. And if it were not for this controversy, if it were not for them continuing to encroach on women's rights and women's sports and women's spaces, they wouldn't have a job title. They wouldn't have a crusade. They wouldn't be able to fundraise. So whereas many people are completely fine with LGBTQ, they support it, people living their lives, I'm one of those people. Once you start pushing people too far, you're going to get the backlash. But I don't think these activists mind the backlash. In fact, I think they thrive off of it, and I think they make their paychecks off of it because they love it. They love keeping this at the center of controversy. That's the only way a lot of these organizations can exist. That's the only way a lot of these nonprofits can exist. And that's the only way that some of these people can take huge salaries pretending to be and cosplaying to be advocates for the LGBTQ community. And it's really a shame.
And Tomi ends off her argument perfectly. This entire debate is a money-making machine for activists and organizations that thrive on the outrage. Think about it. If the controversy goes away, so does their paycheck. It's not about equality. It's about keeping the outrage cycle spinning so they can continue to get their paycheck. They're not fighting for trans rights. They're simply fighting to stay relevant. And the craziest part, they don't care if it becomes at the expense of women's rights, children's safety, or the integrity of sports. As long as the donation button gets clicked, it's all fair game. I mean, it's disgusting and it's time to call it out. Once again, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. As always, this is an issue, just like many, that should be decided by the majority of the people. So I would love to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments below. If you agree, disagree with any of the points made here, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Be sure to give us a like and subscribe, really helps out the channel, and we'll see you guys in the next one.